Ladies and gentlemen, looks like we've got quite a video for ourselves today, and I think this one is targeted towards a lot of people who have been going ahead and critiquing the game that we all love to critique, Genshin Impacto. And the title of this video over here is by Goat Liffy, and the title is The Dumbass Way to Complain About Genshin. And this is a phenomenon that we've seen a lot of times before, right? Creators that are stuck in their Hoyoverse echo chamber, repeating a lot of very, probably not well-constructed points, and then seeing the reaction from a relatively stupid audience bolstering bad takes. We've already seen it before. And the one example that I want to talk about that I think is just really clear on everybody's mind is none other than Flip, who decided to go ahead and make a video completely filled with misinformation about Glaive, Kyo, and I about how we are killing the gacha community. And all he does in this is just spout off a bunch of bullshit. And the reaction to this video was incredible at the start, right? It cultivated around 2,000, 3,000 updates with only 200, 300 dislikes. Then somebody just goes in, reacts to it, points out where the reasoning is entirely, completely flawed, and then, this is the end result that occurs. This isn't comments brigading. These aren't people going ahead and just downvoting a video because it's not true. These are people reacting to blatant misinfo that Genshin creators are making. And let's just go ahead and see if the same exact thing is happening over here, ladies and gentlemen. Because, of course, this seems to be rather targeted, doesn't it? So, without further ado, let's get right on into this one.
Alright guys, I get it. A lot of us just like to bash on Genshin given any opportunity. I'm no stranger to doing that as well every now and then. You hate something? You hate it. That's just how it is. You dislike something, then you dislike it. But at the very least, make your dislike make sense. Make it so that you want to criticize something for the sake of actually criticizing it and hate it with your chest. And if you want to just blindly hate something just because it makes you look cool, at least try to disguise it. Why am I starting this video off like this? Well,
okay, so the first thing, and the way that he's starting the video off right now, right, is going ahead and writing off criticisms that people are making towards the game. We're using language like say it like you mean it, meaning that people aren't authentic, they aren't genuine with the critiques that they're making. I'm excited to see what the examples are and what he's gonna bring up to paint this narrative that the critiques being made are not genuine.
The other day, I was just doing my regularly scheduled scrolling through Instagram instead of sleeping routine when I came across
That's the first red flag. He scrolls through Instagram in 2025.
This post. The user Nubaruki here posted some Azure Lane related content where the video seemed to be showcasing a dev video where they compared how the game's graphics will be improved and were doing a side-by-side comparison. Pretty tame so far, right? Just a random video as far as you're concerned. But what really got me squinting
Chat, this video is about Genshin Impact.
was actually the caption included at the top of the comparison video, which reads, Azure Lane just upgraded their character models and made the game look better than ever. Meanwhile,
the first kind of red flag for me is the creator here calling it Azure Lane. That to me is kind of the first red flag, is that we haven't done enough research to know that this is Azure Promilia and that it's made by Azure Lane, but it's literally a completely different game because Azure Lane is 2D. And also, Azure Lane has been released for years, and Azure Promilia is not out yet. So, this is the thing, right? I'm not going to read too much into, he did say Azure Lane about 300 times. Maybe he just got the names confused because they both have Azure in it. But it also is kind of telling that a mistake this big was made. Just saying.
While a certain multi-million-dollar game still can't do the bare minimum for theirs. Now, before a lot of you go ahead and say, oh, they didn't say that it was Genshin, but the fact that you immediately think of Genshin just means that the problem is true and that their complaint is valid. No. You can look at the comments that were left in the video to see what the poster was really aiming for. But
okay, so people are bringing up Genshin and then saying that Genshin has a shocking lack of improvements, not really showing the budget. You're basically having a game that isn't even released yet that, literally can't be making as much money making better changes. Okay.
You can even see the intent without the comments. Brother tagged Genshin related topics and hashtags. In fact, there's almost as much Genshin tags on it compared to the actual Azure Lane topics, so it kind of made me doubt if they even wanted to praise Azure Lane in the first place. And like I
You could also think about it this way. Genshin Impact is, without a doubt, the biggest gacha game that exists based off a player base. And that's due to the fact that, once again, we can reiterate this how many times we want, right? It was like one of the biggest games during COVID and then built up a massive player base. It is also, when you think about gacha games, that is one of the first ones that come to mind. And so, this is the thing. If you're in the position where you are the biggest game in a certain space, you will constantly be compared to whenever there's another game in the genre that's coming out or soon to be released. How many times in the past have we heard Call of Duty killer, Call of Duty competitor, when Call of Duty during the late 2000s, the early 2010s was without a doubt the name of the game when it comes to first-person shooters, with multiple titles in a row, right? That kind of built up on the last. Modern Warfare 2 was kind of like its peak, right? Every single FPS game that came out afterwards or during the same time as Call of Duty was compared to Call of Duty. Much like how every MMORPG that came out was compared to World of Warcraft. And the thing is, if you're in a position where you're Genshin Impact, the comparisons are naturally going to be made because it is the biggest game. But also take a look at the trend of games like World of Warcraft and Call of Duty. They used to be the biggest. Then several years later, stagnancy, a lack of developer effort, and a lack of developer creativity. Kind of sound familiar, right? They're not in the top spot anymore. So, you can see even more why the comparisons are getting made, because the same exact lack of developer effort is also happening in Genshin that happened for those other games.
I said, I'm down to see your average Genshin slop every now and then, but when they are complaining about things that were just outright idiotic to complain about, I've seen enough of these types of posts to...
So, is complaining about the lack of effort that Hoyoverse puts into updating their models and modernizing their gameplay despite earning billions of dollars, is complaining about that lack of effort bullshit? I think that that's what we should clarify right off of the bat when it comes to this video. The creator has gone ahead and wiped away the criticism that Genshin Impact is doing nothing at all with the money that they are earning from their customers and also not improving the game significantly to the degree that warrants the amount that people are spending. And he has just wiped away all of that criticism and basically said it's disingenuous or not bullshit. I think the reason is because Genshin was tagged in here on the post. And so that criticism is no longer valid. Guys, it's in the first 2 minutes of the video. And remember that this was the like ratio heading on into it. That's how dumb the Genshin audience on YouTube is. You can just go ahead and say, because Genshin was tagged in here, the criticism that you see is not actually genuine or valid. Even though the people making the criticism for Genshin Impact, right, aren't the person that made the tags. They're different people. And so it's like, even if the person making the post was like disingenuous, right? It's not like they're also the person making the comments as well. It's just the reasoning here in this situation makes absolutely no sense, but they're just eating it up.
Also saying, you know what? Let me smoke this stupidity out real quick. To begin with, those who are willing to do that little bit of research would see that the video was actually a video showcase for Azure Promilia instead of Azure Lane.
Okay. He's got that bit covered. He was quoting the Instagram guy. Okay. Because I was going to say, yeah, it shows like a little bit of a lack of research, but it's also like, how does that have anything to do with the comments that the post got? I don't see how this is related to the comments that are showing up made by other people. Maybe I'll be enlightened.
Azure Promilia is a new and upcoming gacha game that the same developers are making using the Azure IP. Only this time, they are turning it into an open world fork, as is what most gacha games these days are attempting to do with their IPs. Do you guys, see the problem already? First, they referred to Genshin as a multi-million-dollar game. It's a multi-billion-dollar game. Second, they say that the clips they are showing are from Azure Lane, when a quick search clearly shows that it wasn't. Someone even pointed out the fact that this wasn't Azure Lane in the comments, and all the OG poster said was, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest here. What does this have to do with criticism about Genshin Impact?
Because they know that should...
Is he proceeding to just like nitpick the details about a game that isn't Genshin? Proceeded to make the situation worse by clarifying that it's not multi-million, it's actually multi-billion, so they make more money than what he's saying. And so the criticisms that they're not making any updates at all to the game are literally worse.
Be enough to prove the idiocy of their so-called comparison with Genshin. And lastly, Azure Promilia isn't even out yet. Hell, it doesn't even have a proper release date just yet. They are comparing the fundamental features of an upcoming game which still has all the opportunity to develop and change their game's fundamentals to a live service game that's been on a 6-week update cycle for almost 5 years now that no longer has the time.
Is he trying to make a defense for why Genshin, the multi-billion-dollar game, is not able to upgrade their systems? Like, they literally make billions of dollars. The answer to this question quite literally is Hoyoverse doesn't feel like investing the money to make the changes. That's the only answer. It's just they could just have a separate team that they hire out to go make the changes independently of the 6-week release cycle, and then just have like a big patch that fixes up the game. But they just don't want to do that because they don't want to spend the money doing that. They're even like, they make so much money and they want to spend so little that they discontinued support for the PS4. Even though they could continue it, they just don't want to spend the resources to do that anymore, despite making billions of dollars. Most people would recognize, after hearing all the information and hearing all the facts, he's literally actually painting Hoyoverse in a worse light. Maybe that's why the video actually has a lot of upvotes. Maybe it's because like people are viewing this as satire.
To change those fundamentals. Mind you, Azure Lane was released in 2017, so for them to get a new game 8 years later and comparing it with a game that's only almost 5 years old definitely should make sense to the logical mind. Now, again, like I said, I'm down for some complaining every now and then, but to put it this way while also exposing just how little
Counter-argument Warframe exists, I mean, there are so many counter-arguments to the bullshit point he's making. Just look at Wuthering Waves 2.3 to Wuthering Waves 2.4 and look at how the graphics have accelerated to like god tier levels in just one patch. Like, you don't even have to go to like other games. You can just stick in gacha and just think of WuWa 2.3 to WuWa 2.4, the physics upgrades, like all of that stuff that happens in Septimon, how much better the game looks. Naturally, the graphic requirements are higher. Rip to those with RTX 3060s. It's like shit like that, where you can clearly see that WuWa's been upgraded. It looks better. It has all these different systems and stuff like that. And then Genshin has been stagnant for 5 fucking years. It's like bro just decided to go ahead and not recognize that it's very simple to bring up counterexamples and counterpoints to all the bullshit that the guy is saying right now.
you know about game development and underestimating the amount of work.
Genshin Impact wants to run on everything though, that's the difference. Everything except the PS4 apparently.
Every now and then, but to put it this way while also exposing just how little you know about game development and underestimating the amount of work needed to even consider those kinds of changes on a live game.
Wait, so now is he talking about, oh, the poor developers, you don't know what goes into game development. Oh, the poor devs, the poor multi-billion-dollar company. Just hire more people. Literally, this is a situation where if you have a baseline feature to the game that you want to upgrade, but you don't want to interrupt the regular release cycle, you simply hire another team to work on the development and then maintain and keep up the 6-week release cycle. This dev makes billions of dollars. Said so himself, confirmed by the creator. So like...
really hurts the representation of your IQ, and it just exposes the enormous size of your ignorance. Cause
it's so ironic that this is what's being said about the people critiquing Genshin. This is the defense.
I want you guys to look at this comment that the poster mentioned, and before you read it, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a video game programmer or someone who works with video game engines. Put yourself in their shoes and tell me if you can read the following comment without shitting your brain. Multi-billion-dollar company, but still can't upgrade the game's engine. Aha, yes, someone has to tell Nubaruki here that upgrading a game's engine isn't as simple as pressing update and then installing something in Steam.
Did they say it was? There's a reason why they led their critique with multi-billion-dollar company, because the expectation is that they have the resources to be able to do things that other people can't do. And because simply upgrading your game's engine is something that is kind of harder to do, that's why they said multi-billion-dollar company as a clarification, because they would have the resources to be able to do it. This is such a bad video.
Much less the game engine of a game that is still very actively running as a live service product.
My brain cells are exploding right now. I'm shitting my brains because of how they're analyzing this statement. Literally disregarding an 8-word sentence, only looking at 4 of them. It's an 8-word sentence, and we only looked at 4 of the words in it to straw man this point. I realize this is a bunch of bullshit, so we're gonna up the speed a little bit. This is crazy. Yeah, okay.
With an update schedule of 6 weeks between each patches. And it doesn't even take long for you to see that fact from other video games in general. Once a game engine is locked in for the official live release of a game,
and Unity isn't even the problem either, right? The critique that it's, oh, they need to upgrade the game engine. Just look at Punishing Grey Raven, right? Look at PGR and the latest DMC collab. That's all on Unity as well. And so you really don't need that much stuff, right? To be able to put in new features, new graphics, new capabilities into your game, even if it is on Unity. You just need the effort. And there's not a lot at Hoyoverse HQ.
the devs will more often than not stick with that specific iteration of the game engine, down to the versions and all that. They only update or port it when specific iteration of that game engine itself no longer receives support from the people making them. Because having to change anything about your game's engine means sinking a dick ton amount of time to making sure that those changes do not absolutely brick your product. And people also have to understand that a dick ton amount of time doesn't mean weeks or months. No, it means
in Honkai Impact 3rd, Hoyo already did that. Upgrade the graphics of the game, add new features while staying on the same engine. Oh right, they did with Honkai Impact Part 3rd, where with the same Unity engine, they turned the game, they added a Z-axis to the game. They added a Z-axis to the gameplay and open world exploration. Oh yeah, they did all of that in Honkai Impact 3rd in their Part 2 update.
means at the very minimum a year or two. And that range can only grow larger the bigger the game is. So, sure, Nubaruki, go ahead and talk with the Genshin dev team, or as a matter of fact, go ahead and walk up to any game dev team.
You can use Hoyoverse's own track record to confirm that what this guy is saying is bullshit.
Set up in their office and tell them to upgrade their game's engine at the snap of their finger. And
Oh, and correcting some misinfo. Honkai Impact 3rd actually got an engine update. It's not that they upgraded the game without upgrading the engine. Honkai Impact 3rd got an upgrade to its engine. Despite being a game that literally earns a fraction of what Genshin Impact does, this game makes no money in relationship. It's getting engine upgrades. I'm telling you, I just think that the Genshin team actually does not fucking care.
trust me, it would be a miracle if you're able to leave the premise through anything other than getting chucked through a window. It's stupid. They could have also just looked at gaming history and looked at the fact that in the handful
It's ironic that he talks about gaming history, but only the bits and pieces that prove his point. Because we just pulled up the history and showed that even Hoyo is proving him wrong. It's crazy that we say we did research and did all of this stuff and then just omit the actual evidence.
of times where major games actually changed out their engines in favor of being able to improve fundamental and core video game features such as lighting, logical functions, and just overall revamping certain major game features, look at the amount of time it took for those developers to achieve it.
Yeah, why don't you just ask Hoyo themselves how long it took for them to achieve it? Right, why isn't this in the video? While we going over getting footage from like games made before 2001, we're literally getting games from 1999 to like prove our point, but we won't use HI3 upgrading its engine 2 years ago as a point. Why aren't we doing that? Oh, whoops.
Biggest example that I can think of and is personally very close to me, Counter-Strike, specifically from CSGO into CS2. You know how long it took for them to then decide to make that change? Just about over 11 years. Do you know how many major graphical changes they did in the span of those years? 0. Do you know how many new guns that they introduced into the game in the same span of 11 years?
So this guy's gonna go ahead and talk about CSGO instead of Honkai Impact 3rd, where CSGO is not this game. Yeah, I don't think the original Counter-Strike was on the Unity engine. It's like, bro will do anything except talk about this glaring example. Holy moly!
5, although technically 4,
It has to be satire, right?
because one of them was just the silenced version of the M4A4 called the M4A1S, which ironically was the gun that already existed in the previous iterations of CS, so people just kinda didn't understand why the S version wasn't a thing from the start. Their major graphics, physics, and feature overhauls only came in the time where they switched out to CS2, because, well, they switched out their engine. And did they end up making a better product? To some people, including me, it was worse than what they had in CSGO. Sure, guns are shinier, smoke blooms look cool and all, and the maps look cooler as well, but general performance now sucks. Spraying sucks. Netcode quote-unquote improvements gets you killed from out of nowhere, and the cheaters, wow, if you didn't know any better, you might have thought that
Holy tangent, Batman!
they removed anti-cheat altogether. People's harping point is always, well, but Hoyo must have the money to build more of their team that can dedicate themselves to building new engines.
Yeah, only for the games that they give a shit about, though. That person is correct. They do have the resources for it, but only for the games they care about.
While the other team maintains the game. Folks, time is the problem. To begin with, there ain't no way they are stretching their team that way. That's just inhumane. And you can
There's a difference between stretching your team and hiring people, which is literally what the recommendation was. And so by hiring people, you no longer stretch your team anymore, because stretching implies that you're using the same number of people to complete more tasks. But we just said to hire more people, and so the stretching point doesn't even make sense.
have as much money as you want in the world, but with the update cycle that they have, the amount of other projects that they have, the amount of divisions that they have by default working on 3 highly active.
And this guy is now, because of his wording, he said stretch and now has all 3 games on the screen. He's implying that the same team works on all 3 games. Like, you would have to be an absolute idiot to assume that the same developer is working on all 3 of these games at the same time. So how does the word stretch even mean anything here?
Live service games. I mean, you guys tell me how feasible it sounds like. Putting a
We just framed an absolutely irredeemably stupid situation and then said, how does this make sense? Look, here's my bastardized summary of what the person was suggesting and all of the consequences of these actions that nobody would ever actually take in the first place. Look how unfeasible this idea is that I've just strawmanned.
team of competent and most likely expensive engineers to then make an improved engine on the side in order to then be simultaneously QA'd with the live version of your live service game to make sure that it can one day be properly ported over, all while making sure that no junk fucks itself over when code and programming, especially when you aren't the one who made it in the first place, has a general stability that's no better than the mental strength of a high school emo teenager in the mid-2000s.
They already did it, though. All this stuff that we're saying is impossible. That is, like, too hard to do. Regardless of how big your budget is, they already did it. So, like, this guy was willing to do a whole, like, 3-minute bit on CSGO and its upgrade from, like, Source to Global Offensive, but couldn't look up that HI3 got the same engine upgrades and all of this shit that he's saying is impossible for the past 8 minutes. Why would Hoyoverse ever improve the game when they have people this dedicated and this intentionally obtuse to defend their lack of updates for them? Why would they ever fix the game when somebody can release a video like this that's actually just filled with complete misinformation and then farm 2k likes and then farm a 90% like ratio on a video that's just actually misinfo? This community is crazy, brother.
Yeah, you'd sound like an idiot for just trying to simplify it to that kind of level.
You took the words out of my mouth, buddy. You took the words out of my mouth, but unfortunately, that sounding like an idiot part has to be directed to you. Because all I need to do is take your entire spiel and then show this.
Just upgrade the game engine. Yeah, suck a fart out, man. I think people just severely underestimated how much of clueless crud's Hoyoverse were when they began developing Genshin. Much less can people begin to even understand the humongous risk that the company was taking by making an open-world gacha game. They used Unity to begin with, and there are people who say that they then used a customized version of Unity, but I can't exactly find proper source to that. I don't even know if they still use Unity, and by now, the main team working on Genshin probably had to bend over backwards to make sure that any feature they added to the game wouldn't completely destroy the code that their predecessors have left them with. The QA on that alone can take up most of the time that they have between each developmental cycle.
So, if they were able to add a Z-axis air combat to Honkai Impact 3rd, a game that was released in 2016, and they added air combat to the game 8 years later, I don't think that the Unity engine is the limitation over here, especially after you see what DMC did in PGR.
The market when they were releasing this thing itself was very uncertain. Are they going to be able to make the game a success? They wouldn't know. No one has ever done it before. And for those of you who keep saying things like, oh then but how come games like WoWa are able to smash their fundamental features out of the park? Well, because they learned. But more importantly, they had the time to take the previous knowledge that Genshin would have had made public to the market and incorporate it to the fundamental coding of their game.
Then why is WoWa 2.4 look so much better than WoWa 1.0 in a year? Why is it then that, oh, I thought it's only in the development lead time where big changes can be made, but then WoWa makes a massive change a year into launch that makes the game look wildly better. And it's just, Genshin has had 5 years. And so that 5-year thing is just coming back to bite him in the ass right now.
Which is why when people make comparisons between WoWa graphics and animations with Genshin, I still say, yeah, WoWa looks incredible. Their graphics are objectively more powerful than...
WoWa looked better in 1.0, and now WoWa looks twice as much better in 2.4. So the gap has only widened, because Hoyoverse has the capability to make the changes that we're talking about over here. They just simply don't want to do it for Genshin.
What Genshin can provide, and Genshin players just need to accept that. But of course, what else was I supposed to expect? For it to be worse? That just doesn't make sense. These upcoming games have to be better than Genshin. They simply have to be. They have an incredible blueprint in
Now, he's gonna make the defense of these new games that come out have to be better. And so it doesn't matter if Genshin is always the worst, because the new games that came out had to be better. That's now the defense that we're saying. Who cares if Genshin is never improved? The new games that came out, they have to be better anyways. So Genshin being the worst is always, you know, it's always justified, guys.
Genshin to copy from, both in terms of figuring out how they want to develop their game and how they want to utilize the market that has now been thoroughly researched through Genshin's Impact itself. Because you know what happens when they don't get on top of taking advantage of those now established metrics? Well, you get Tower of Fantasy. I don't know how that game is still alive at this point, but you can clearly see what happens to an open world gacha game when they don't avoid the pitfalls that Genshin discovered. And
I hope you guys realize all of this reasoning is being done to justify why Genshin Impact still looks like a piece of shit 5 years after its release. This is all being done to justify why Genshin still looks like shit.
And it's a shame because I actually like that game. It's just that the story was hot garbage and optimization was kinda poor, plus power creep was quite a big issue at the start. And all of that prevented the game from reaching the heights that it probably could have. To be honest, I was really surprised when I heard that Wuwa's anniversary went the Genshin route. Like, really? Like, I just genuinely didn't believe it. These guys are always parroted to be the most generous developers, and that's about the most obvious.
They didn't go the Genshin route. The Genshin route is giving three pulls. The Wuwa anniversary gave like fucking 100 something in one of the smallest patches the game has had. Believe me when I say this, the Wuwa anniversary absolutely 1,000,000% cleared pretty much every Genshin anniversary by a fucking mile. Yeah, the Wuwa anniversary patch had some of the most pulls in a patch ever. And it was also one of the patches with like the least number of events, which implies that the rewards were actually quite high. Otherwise, that just doesn't make sense.
Thing that they cannot screw up. But for them to literally make Genshin's mistake 4 years later makes me understand why their player base made such a big deal out of it.
And the fact that this guy doesn't know what the issue of the anniversary even was and just wrote it off as it was the same as Genshin's is crazy. Because the problem with the Genshin anniversary, once again, was the fact that they gave out no fucking pulls. And you cannot say that about Wuthering Waves.
Meanwhile, the rest of the Genshin players just sat there and was like, you know, first time. And people also have to understand that Genshin is still a mobile-centric game. This facet is enough for them to be held back in many sections of the development just because they have to keep thinking about their mobile market, because...
And this guy acts like you can't just make separate clients of the game where the mobile one looks worse than the PC one. Because that's literally what they do in Wuthering Waves, where the game on the PC looks fucking amazing, and then the game on the phone looks like kind of mid. Because there's different graphical settings for the platform that you're running it on. Because the phones don't have hardware as good as the PC, and so the graphics on the... Why do I even have to... For a guy that was willing to go ahead and start doing all of this research, I cannot believe that we have this elementary of a perspective on mobile development. This was the same guy telling you to put yourself in the shoes of a developer.
Well, they have to. That's where they make their money. Which is why I also understand that graphical advancements that Wuwa, Azure Pamelia, and other future gacha namers like Ananta will come at a cost. People in the Wuwa player base cannot understand how Wuwa on occasions make monthly revenue that is below their expectations, while Hoyo's 3 flagships are constantly on the roll. Well, it is because of portable accessibility. Hoyo is just much better at ensuring that. People ain't gonna spend money on your game if they can't run it in the first place.
Does this guy not realize that ZZZ's launch issues were actually worse than Wuthering Waves? People were complaining about Wuwa, that you would get into the game and you wouldn't be able to run it. You all know what ZZZ's launch issue was, ladies and gentlemen? If you had a certain type of phone, you could not even install ZZZ. You would go to download it from the App Store and it would say you're not allowed to put it on your phone. Wuthering Waves, you could run it, and maybe it wasn't that. ZZZ, you couldn't even install the game. And this guy is now going ahead and putting ZZZ on here like it's the most spectacular mobile game ever. He's so misinformed. And the thing is, it's always the most misinformed videos when it comes to Genshin Impact's defense that get the most upvotes. This audience of Genshin Impact Hoyoverse players just want to be told that they're correct. They just want to be told that they're right. They don't actually care if the information that they're being fed is even real. Because this is complete bullshit.
You guys know how difficult it was to get Wuwa running smoothly even when you have a relatively beefy computer. I certainly had that issue with the game. When people say Genshin is optimized for mobile, I think they underestimate the kinds of
Now this guy's bringing up, like, system specs?
mobile phone that can run Genshin. You guys are probably thinking older iPhones, but the optimization in question is really aimed so that people with literal $200 third world secondhand phones have a chance at running it. Though of course, depending on where you are in the world, you can always get something for cheaper. To give you guys a better perspective at the expected performance gap, Wuwa's minimum requirement specs for PC is equal to Genshin's recommended specs. Genshin's minimum specs only ask for you to at least
Is he now justifying Genshin Impact looking like dog shit in 2025 because it has lower specs? So, like, is this all in defense of the game not improving and not looking better? We've just gone into, A, you can't make engine upgrades, but they did. B, Genshin's always going to have competitors, and the competitors always have to be better, so that's another reason why Genshin being bad is fine. And now it's, because the game needs to run on mobile, just like all the other games that look better, it's fine that it looks like shit.
least have a device with the graphics performance of a GT 1030, which to hyperbolic
Genshin is increasing the system specs for 6.0? Oh, so that's something that's happening too. Genshin is increasing its minimum system specs for 6.0. Oh, that's funny. If true, that's funny. That's why PS4 was discontinued? Oh, yeah, that's even funnier.
simplified for you guys, is probably about equal with the same amount of graphics power your grandpa's computer from 15 years ago would have. Literal potatoes. That being said, just a quick PSA because I love you guys if you're watching this. If you have any respect for yourself, your wallet, or your parents' wallet, please do not buy a GT 1030. Even 10-year-old secondhand half-decent GPUs can beat any new GT 1030 in terms of price and performance. Minus
Nobody even knows what a fucking GT 1030 is. What the fuck? Nobody has seen that graphics card in their fucking life.
tech tips can vouch for me on this one. That's why I'm going to emphasize on the fact that this is the dumbass way to complain about Genshin. Because you have to understand, there is a correct way to complain about Genshin. Sure, any complaint is by default subjective, but there are ways to guarantee that the underlying logic behind the complaint would be objectively sound. It reminds me of an even older video where this guy complains about Genshin's code, and ironically, there's actually both sides where a couple of his complaints are logically sound, but most of the rest of them just didn't have the same type of logic supporting it. I only watched it because I was actually curious if Genshin was severely limited by how donkey their initial code may have been due to their inexperience.
Yeah, they say that the dog shit code of Genshin is why you don't have artifact selectors yet. You know how the artifact the artifact loadouts in Genshin work, right? You gotta put in like a stat combination and then it just spits out some random shit that you can save for later. Yeah, I think the thing is that Hoyo never actually coded their artifacts as like separate entities, and they're all just like some fucking uncategorizable shit, and that's why you have to like use some filter feature that just min-maxes a certain stat, and that's the only way to get loadouts. That's what people are theorizing at this point, because there's really no other excuse for why it still doesn't have loadouts yet 5 years later. There's just no excuse at this point, so people have to assume that they coded them all fucked up. Otherwise, the devs literally just hate you.
He talks about how he dies when supposedly iframing with Yoimiya's ult, when if you pause it, you can see the rock wave hitting Yoimiya in the last frame before he ults, which is just an unfortunate case that he was a split frame late on hitting the burst. He complains about how Eula doesn't funnel energy through her burst when it literally is just because of how long her ult animation lasts. Though actually, I've had cases where I can funnel energy if you manage to sprint away from your energy orbs fast enough, but just either play her with A or Rosaria and a proper rotation should solve that. He complains that only Hu Tao has that whole phasing through things feature and says that dodging in general should be the same as that, when really, that was a feature special to only Hu Tao's sprint mechanic. It wasn't something that was meant to be a general use case.
Yeah, and the guy's saying that the game feels better when you can dodge like that, and the game feels like shit when you iframe an attack and then still get hit by it. Yes, that was a point of feedback about how when you iframe an attack and when you dodge and you get the feedback that you dodged in a game, still getting hit after doing that feels like shit. And we're just going ahead, we're like, oh, it's time to defend Hoyoverse! Actually, the developers intended that after you perfectly iframe an attack that you should still get a hit. And because the developers intended it that way, it's actually good design. So your suggestion is bad.
He complains about how Genshin didn't want to find a fix to a Yaemiko targeting issue when a quick search was enough to see that the devs actually listened to the people wanting their previous targeting mechanic back, which wasn't a problem to begin with. It's just that the devs thought that
What is bro yapping about? Okay, we'll just let him play out and just chime in if he says anything. I don't even know what the fuck he's saying anymore. Like, what is the point of this dialogue?
She was supposed to play a different way, but the moment the player base said, hell nah, they just said, okay, we'll put it back. Same thing happened with Beyblade Nouvellette. He even wanted to make
those were bug fixes, Beyblade Nouvellette and all that stuff, bug fixes that nerfed the character. There were bug fixes that literally made the character weaker. People complained because the character they spent money on is noticeably weaker after the changes Hoyoverse made, and so they complained and then Hoyoverse changed it back. Yeah, and Hoyo was also facing lawsuits, specifically over the Beyblade Nouvellette thing. And that's probably another big reason why they changed it back, because they were getting sued in China for it. Why does he not mention those things?
Make it so that if you have a shield, then enemies shouldn't be able to push you, like physically displace you, which logically sound. It's not like you just suddenly gain Saitama level of standing power when you use Zhongli's shield.
You are literally immune to interruption with the shield. So you literally do have, he's like, oh yeah, like, wouldn't that be funny? All the characters would just be like Saitama with it. You already are, because believe me, if you got hit, like, if we're gonna be using logic, right? If you got hit by one of these gigantic fucking lizards, your attack animation in real life would probably be interrupted. But they're not in this game as long as you have a shield.
And I doubt most characters would canonically not at least get pushed even with invincibility shields. Now, like I said before,
now he's saying, oh, the characters canonically would not be able to be... What?
Contrary to those points, he did have some proper and logically sound complaints, like the fact that Jean's burst forces you to look at her face and changes your camera angle when you finish the animation, or Dehya's kit, like literally the entirety of Dehya's kit. This is what I mean when there is a correct way to be complaining about Genshin.
What this guy just did was nitpick the shit out of every single one of the critiques that he put up there with shit that literally nobody cares about and is completely irrelevant to the discussion. Literally just fishing for ways to say that somebody is incorrect.
Well, canonically, the characters will get pushed around in combat, and so this is actually not a feature, even though I'm gonna canonically ignore how
a massive fucking attack, you just wouldn't be able to iframe, just wouldn't be able to, like, just fucking hyper armor through it canonically either.
And by that, I mean that there are actually a lot of ways to be correctly complaining about Genshin. Fundamentally, Dehya's kit just doesn't make sense. An off-field tank in a game where shields and off-field healing is just insanely strong.
You wanna know what the funny thing is that I'm pretty sure Dehya actually saw a significant amount of meta usage following the release of Farina. And the thing is that she had a spot in the meta briefly, but because she's a standard character like every other one, got phased out of it ASAP. Yeah, I don't think Mizuki is used either, guys.
A seemingly strong brawling burst that cannot make use of any supporting kit that would have made it worth using in the first place. It also just ended up disconnecting from her character as well. Sure, Dehya taking damage for others is on par with her character, but then having her do it off-field instead of her being the one crueling it as the active character just canonically doesn't make sense. And I was veritably pissed at this because I love Dehya's character. I love her design, and I think her character story is one of the best written character stories that Genshin has. So to see her receive such a lackluster kit was a massive kick in the balls for me. Speaking of story,
She has burning teams with Mualati too? Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I don't see a lot of people complaining about Dehya anymore because she's like somewhat usable in some teams. Obviously, she's not the best because she's a standard unit, but like, yeah, I've heard they actually made her somewhat usable.
Another more logical facet to complain about Genshin, because they have far more control over what they can narratively put in the game instead of being restricted by technological elements. Screwing that up creates greater consequences, as it should actually do. Beyond complaints that revolves around something like, I guess, not Christ circumstances, I can give you an easier example. Like, let's say, version 5.3, Incandescent Ode of Resurrection. When you put Capitano alongside Aether and Mavuika fighting the Soythoth as your version splash screen, you would think that you can then expect to see such a scene happen in the story itself. And obviously, it created big hype. A Harbinger fighting alongside the Archon and the Traveler, even more so when it's Capitano and Mavuika, was a scene that I think everyone wanted to see. Fast forward to the quest itself and we barely see Capitano play the direct role that the splash screen would have suggested. Sure, he has a big role in terms of the bigger picture, but people understandably felt like they've been blueballed, cause he...
Okay, so we've gone from invalidating critiques about Genshin Impact for a bunch of bullshit reasons over here, and now we're hyper-critiquing Genshin Impact because of a splash art for a version update. We're now hyper-critiquing a splash art.
He was not part of the Gosoithoth fight, like, at all. And
Hey guys, let me take the same level of critique that this guy's doing for a splash art and apply it to Wuthering Waves 2.5. So this is the level of hyper analysis the guy is doing over here. So as you can see in this splash art, right? As you can see in this splash art, Rover is actually only about up to, from leg to head, he's only up to like Frolova's eye, starting from her waist. But when I'm actually in game and I was playing through the quest, right? Rover was taller than Frolova. And so I think that what they're actually representing on the splash art over here is like, I thought she was a giantess and, or like I was playing like a midget, and I thought that we were gonna go on like some wacky adventure with a gigantic Fenrico. And so the fact that I saw this splash art where the main characters are tiny, and then, you know, these two characters are huge, and then in-game we're just the same height as them, it was like a complete disappointment. Like, I could not believe that Kuro Games did this. It's ironic that this video is called the dumbass way to complain about Genshin. Isn't that crazy that this video is called the dumbass way to complain about Genshin? I'm not gonna lie. I don't think I've ever seen somebody hyper-analyze a version splash art and then give this big of a critique about it. I think it's fair to say that is the dumbest Genshin critique I've heard.
they could have made it make sense for him to come into the Night Kingdom and fight alongside Mufika and Aether.
This is just a critique of the story, brother. You just didn't like the story. And we've managed to make it about the splat. You just don't like the story of this quest because all of Natlan's story sucks ass. This ain't a critique of the splash art. This is a critique of the story.
Because I genuinely thought that at the end of version 5.2's Archon quest, where they teased him talking with Yohual Tekutin, is that he was going there to ask and see if he himself could get an ancient name so that Mavrika can actually take him to join in the fighting. Because if someone from beyond Teyvat can get an ancient name, then what's to say that someone from Teyvat cannot get an ancient name?
He's gonna forge an ancient name for himself. He's gonna forge an ancient name for himself. I'm gonna call it right here.
And there are many more logically sound complaints that you can shoot at them, many of which I've covered in various other videos. Skip buttons, the fact that they put in some sort of artifact loadout system but make it completely not what people wanted in the first place, artifact salvaging options the way Star Rail has, complain about the fact that having the Traveler, the main character, be predominantly mute was definitely a huge narrative and creative mistake.
Hey, I think he's I think he's spitting over here. I think this might be the one part of the video that's not crazy.
You already get my point by now. There are many things that you can rightfully complain about, but these people just decided to just do ones that make them look like complete idiots.
Unfortunately, the amount of defense that you've played and the crazy ridiculous examples that this CC showed for why it's okay or it's good for Genshin to be lazy and not make updates to the engine or to the game are immediately proven wrong by the fact that this exists and that this fucking happened. And so it's just the fact that the entire like first half of his video can be like Control Z'd by this just shows how bad of a video it actually is.
People within those videos that I showed you are sometimes the kind of people that just straight up needs to be asked. If you think it's so easy and so doable, then why don't you directly suggest it to them or show them? And I don't mean in a way where you just like make a video telling people that the problem exists. Make that video and give your solution.
Okay, here's my video, here's my solution, since you're so desperately asking for it. Just do what you did in your older game! Is that good enough? Have we clarified the issue?
Or better yet, do what I do. When I complain about the story, I give suggestions. I give fixes that I think would be logical to do. It may not be what everyone agrees to, but at least I make it known and incite discussion. Guy who complains about Genshin's code just to say, it'll take testing, but it should be easy. How? How is it easy?
I don't need to answer that question, do I? I think we've already seen it enough.
Just because you said so? Why not show a scenario where it would be easy? It doesn't even have to be a real scenario, just one that can representatively show the notion that you're suggesting.
It's just so painful knowing that this guy created this 22-minute video, and then it just gets completely invalidated by a single fucking link. Like, it makes you wonder, as he was going through, like, crafting the narrative process of this video, did he just, like, not find this piece of data? It's...
One of them even said, why have limited stamina in an open world game? And it probably clued me into the notion that they probably don't play a lot of open world games to begin with, because a lot of open world games uses stamina. There is simply no point in asking for things that clearly wasn't in Genshin's framework to begin with. because that's just not how video game development works. You want them to put AI mouth and dub sync-ups when it was a game released in 2020, and the only other major title which had successfully used such a feature at the time was Final Fantasy VII Remake. Even so, they have shown that they can put it in for their games that had the opportunity to have such features in their games. Star Rail has it, and Zenless has it. Incorporating AI dub sync is not as simple as dropping a node in a GIMP port. You want improved shading and textures. There's not only that initial problem of optimization and performance, but advancing lighting and shaders when you already have an established game, level designs, and overall look is just a change that they won't be willing to go through with their engine due to the time constraints.
Okay, so once again, it's okay when Hoyoverse doesn't put in the effort when games with billions less budget like Wuthering Waves and developers with less manpower like Kuro Games are doing it. Because believe me, there was a big change to Wuwa's shaders and all of that in version 2.4. And so with the smaller team, with the smaller budget, they made bigger updates that look better. It's just, I'm telling you, the case just seems worse and worse every single time we try to come up with another piece of defense.
But in the areas like pre-rendered cutscenes, it's clear that they have improved their ability to utilize those features in their animations, which shows that there must be something holding them back from being able to fully port it into the actual gameplay portions.
Well, this is also a thing that we forgot. Sorry, let me just go pull up this one last Skirk story quest. Sorry, I need to go take a look at something.
Don't be scared. Ah!
This way!
We'll never make it! Fire. There's fire everywhere. What happened?
I told you we shouldn't have trusted these outsiders!
Yet, once again,
Why did he use that one as B-roll? I wonder why he didn't use that one as B-roll when it's in the one of the most recent updates to the game.
they made sure that their future products took full advantage of those improvements. If you want any sort of hope for those changes to ever be seen, then it will more than likely be in the form of a sequel game. Just like how Honkai Impact improved their overall UI and look by making Honkai Impact Third the Second, which is one of the weirdest game naming schemes I've seen in life, but
Wait, so it's the same game. You use the same account. You have the same characters and the same everything. And it was an engine up. Wait, so he knows about this. Wait, he knows about It's the same game with an engine upgrade. It's Honkai Impact Third. This is not a new game. You don't like make a new account and like start off from like level 0 to it's the same game.
you know, what else would you do? Maybe that whole Genshin 1000-star thing that people found on Bilibili that time can be that sequel? We won't know for now. Of course, the Genshin devs did say that they have acknowledged the fact that average players probably should have beefier devices by now, and are going to push game performances.
Didn't he just justify Genshin's low system requirements as a reason for why it's not improving?
Coming into Not Cry. But I'm actually very cautious of that and hope that they can keep budget playability as the priority. Unless they want to push for the whole stream your game thing, which I also ain't much of a fan of just yet. So please, I get that unbridled hatred for Genshin is kind of the rave over these past few years, but make sure you don't out yourself as a complete idiot when doing so.
The most ironic thing I think we've heard in the video was somebody outing them, like him saying that other people are outing themselves as idiots.
Maintain a point of objectivity if you can, but above all, make it make sense. Keep it logical, or else you just make things that matter go by the wayside just because you wanted to get some algorithmic traction. At the end of it all, that wouldn't help anyone.
I'm sorry, can you just take like all the shit that he said, just like wrap it up, turn it around, and then send it back? Brother.
That's it. Thank you for watching as always. Until the next video, the name's Leafy, and I'll see you guys next time. Sayonara.
Okay, this is one of the craziest videos I've ever. I'm just gonna do this. Okay. This has to be one of the most misinformation filled, like obtuse, like not to the point. It like went on like 30 different tangents and then proceeded to just make some of the worst arguments I've ever heard in defense of this game and in defense of these developers who literally are not putting in any effort at. I'm just gonna do that, okay? I'm just gonna do that. It is what it is. Of course, he's a ZZZ creator. Of course, he's in the Hoyo creator program. Who would have thought that a video like this would come out of somebody from the Hoyo creator program? I don't. That'll be that, ladies and gentlemen. I don't even think I need to provide a summary. Just let me know what you all think. Peace.